It is now my great pleasure to welcome, slightly belatedly, to the Korea Bridge Webcasting Center, a man who is truly a multifaceted ESL talent, textbook producer, website guy, former president of KOTESOL, Andrew Finch. Thank you very much for joining us, Andrew.
Thank you, Jeff.
Before getting into some of the ESL stuff, I was wondering about asking some personal background things. How did you wind up getting into ESL, and how did you wind up in Korea?
I think this is fairly legendary now that I came to Korea to study Baduk, which is Go, because I was spending so much time in England studying Baduk and not getting anywhere. The Koreans call this mul Baduk, water Baduk, when you study the book but you never get any actual practice. So I thought I've got to go to Korea, find out how to do it before I die, rather than being 80 in England and saying I wish I'd done it. So I just got on a plane and came to Korea. And after that, I just got into English teaching.
Now, you could have studied Go in a number of Asian countries. Why did you choose Korea?
Well, I asked some friends about this, and I asked a man who'd studied in Japan. And he said, if you go to Japan, you'll always be a visitor. But if you go to Korea, no, I've got it wrong. If you go to Japan, you'll always be a guest. But if you go to Korea, you'll always be part of the family. And I thought, right, off we go to Korea. Plus the fact that since 1981, Korean professionals are the best in the world. And now, they used to study in Japan, but now they study in Korea, which is called Doenjang Baduk. It's real Korean Baduk. It's an incredible form of Baduk. It uses the same technique that the Japanese use, but it goes off into lateral thinking in the middle game. And this is where EFL and ESL comes in, that these people, we can go straight into it now, that these people, they learn the books, they eat the books. And you watch these people, this is why we have Baduk Hagwons. These people study every aspect of technique, and then they throw it away. And that's what they tell. I actually had professional lessons in Seoul, and my professional teacher, he would teach me some forms. He would say, right, do this form 20 times, then forget it, go and have a game. And from there, this taught me a lot about EFL learning, because we're always criticizing the Korean method of learning English. We're always criticizing the rote learning. We're always saying, my students have learnt by rote, therefore their learning preference is rote, therefore they can't be creative. And what I see in Baduk is exactly the opposite. And these people are the world champions, so forget about it. And what they do, as I said, they learn all the technique, and then they just jump into lateral thinking. And I believe our students can do that as well. I believe our students can be incredibly creative. And I believe they've got a great advantage over people like Hispanic learners who start off with fluency first. Our students have got enormous data banks of language inside their heads. And all we have to do as educators is to access it. And I found that it's incredibly successful when you do get in there and access it. Because, I'll keep going here, sorry about this, but one of the things that faced me when I came to Korea was, here I am, I've been studying Baduk for 10 years. I've read every book I could lay my hands on. I've played lots and lots in England. I've gone to every conference I could go to. Why is it that I'm playing against an 8-year-old and he's beating me? This 8-year-old, he hasn't read any of these books. How come? How come he can beat me? What's going on here? And then I started looking at the learning process involved and the thinking process. And I found out, because Baduk is full of proverbs, I found out that one of the proverbs is, some players play by how a move feels, some players play by how a move looks. And what we're into here is pattern recognition. And these little kids have learned all about pattern recognition. And they're just off, we're almost into complexity theory now. So I'm thinking, wow, where's the rote learning here? These kids are incredibly creative. And they're wiping the floor with me.
Baduk has sort of helped you realize that there is a role for learning the patterns, and it is important to kind of then let it go and stop thinking, both in Baduk and in EFL learning.
Right.
How has that wisdom manifested itself in your teaching and in the learning materials that you've produced?
Well, again, with the learning materials, with the teaching, I think the first thing we have to realize is that we're in a situation here in which the students have done all the learning. They've been learning middle school, high school, even these days, even in elementary school. They've learnt all the grammar, they've learnt all the structure. And if they haven't learnt it, if a person's coming into your classroom and he doesn't have the grammar, then he's made a conscious decision not to learn it, because it's been rammed down his throat for 6 years in school. So if we come along and say, right, now I'm going to teach you grammar, I believe we're being amazingly arrogant. We're saying, well, your teachers have all failed, but I'm going to show you how to do it. So I think this is in completely the wrong place to start. I think we've got to say, here are the people in my class. They've all got various experiences, but they've all been taught grammar for 6 years. So I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show them how to access that grammar. And, you know, the sort of subtext of Tell Me More is all the students talking all the time. And that's my goal. So from day one, it's all the students talking all the time. And from that point, once you start opening the doors of fluency, the grammar starts coming up. And wonderful things start happening because these students have been taught how to fail for all of their life. All the unconfident students there, their whole education has been about, you are a failure because you haven't passed this stupid test that we keep giving you all the time. And the students have internalized that, and they're saying, yes, that's right, I'm a failure. That's why I'm in this third-class university. That's why I'm not in Seoul University, because I'm a failure. So if you start going in and say, hey, look at this, you've just done a communication task. You've just communicated successfully to the other person. What's the problem here? And this again is why I got into alternative assessment, where we've got the students assessing each other, assessing themselves, assessing each other, and saying, well, look at that, I've just solved a problem-solving task. I communicated successfully. I did what I was asked to do. And the confidence-raising aspect of this is extremely important. I believe we've got a lot of people who've been taught how to be unconfident in our classes. And that our job is to get in there, fluency first, everybody talking, everybody interacting, and the rest just comes on. Once you've got this non-threatening learning environment, just interact, just communicate. We're not going to test you about it. Once the students start getting confident and feeling comfortable, after 4 weeks or so, they start asking you grammar questions. And they say, well, I'd like to do this, but I'm not sure about the language. Can you help me? And at that point, you're a teacher, because you're giving the appropriate learning content to the appropriate student at the appropriate time. And the question came from the student. You're not imposing it on him.
Okay, the books that you've produced, Tell Me More, and now You're Talking the Way Ahead, to name a few, are unique in several significant ways. And the most striking for me when I saw them was that they're almost entirely activity-based. I think most teachers and students are used to seeing the little grammar box in the listening section, and I think it takes some people out of their comfort zone,
Right.
both teachers and students. Firstly, how do you respond to the teachers and the students saying, oh, but and you've answered that partially, but how has they've been on the market for a few years now?
6 years.
6 years. 6 years. How's the assessment going? What has succeeded about this approach? What would you like to fine-tune?
This is very interesting, because I wrote Tell Me More, Now You're Talking the Way Ahead, because I was invited to make a program at Andong National University. And I looked around at the EFL books at that time, and there was nothing to fill the gap. There was nothing that was student-centered. There was nothing that was about the Korean culture for Korean students. And of course, in my doctorate as well, I'd done a lot of studying into the research on materials design, and there was nothing that fitted what we wanted. So I wrote these books, and at first the teachers found it very difficult to understand what was happening. And this is a big problem. At first, even Tell Me More, teachers were very unsure of what to do. And when I started talking about affective goals, confidence, motivation, independence, this was even stranger, because I was saying to the teachers, look, forget about the language. The way you assess your classes, are the students more confident, more motivated, more independent as a result of me being in that classroom. That's how you assess yourself at the end of the day. And there are a lot of chasms for us to jump over. Now it's old hat. Now it's no problem at all. 6 years later, we're doing this in Seoul Sanupdae. We've introduced the new book, which is It's Up to You, which is all about project-based alternative assessment. And now the teachers, some teachers are saying, well, quite honestly, I'd like to go back to Tell Me More. Because basically with Tell Me More, I just let the students get on with it. With It's Up to You, I have to work hard because it's project-based. And
for teachers who are using the book, what kind of assessment do you suggest that they use when they have to?
Sorry, which one?
Tell Me More, Now You're Talking, for example, which are all activity-based. How do you suggest that teachers assess their students at the end of the semester?
This again is another problem that we worked on and that we put it into the latest book, It's Up to You. We went into alternative assessment. So with Tell Me More and the others, we were just concentrating on fluency. We just wanted to open the doors. We wanted to show the students you are communicating. We wanted to show the teachers that it's okay just to have the students talking all the time. You don't have to model anything because they already know it. Just get in there and make them confident. But there is this problem. How do you assess it? There's the problem of all performance assessment. This is a minefield. It's terrible. Even the experts can't agree on what to do and whether it's valid if you do it. So I believe you have to go straight back to the students. And again, there's a lot of research on this. So I looked into research on self-assessment, peer assessment, and you're going back to learner training. You're teaching the students how to learn. You get into alternative assessment. For the moment, you're forgetting about grammar or anything. You're saying, I'm giving these students life skills. I'm showing them how to teach themselves. Because when they get out of this university or school, for the rest of their life they're going to have to acquire new skills, because that's what our society is. Our society is about a new computer thing coming along every 5 years, and you've got to acquire those skills. So we're giving you the skills to do that. So we went into It's Up to You, and we put a lot of self-assessment and peer assessment in there. And we find, as far as I'm concerned, that has solved the question. Because now the students do all the assessment, they write it in the book, and at the end of the day I use those grades. Now there are all sorts of issues going on here, but as I said, I do find that works. I think we better go on to the next question.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to interrupt the interview just a moment. We have to take care of some webcasting details. No, everything's ready to go. All you need to do is take all of your gear, head to 106 for the live webcast of Mark Helgeson at 1 o'clock. In that tangle over there. You mentioned that the books were designed specifically for Korean students. Mm-hmm. And it includes a lot of cultural references and specific things to Korea. What else did you take into mind when you were designing for a Korean student as opposed to a Japanese student or a Chinese student? That's part one of the question. Part two is, how much have these books been used in non-Korean learning environments, and are there plans to internationalize them?
Yes, let's start straight on that one. I've actually just rewritten Tell Me More for the Chinese audience because there's a publisher interested in China. And what I've done basically is to take out all the cultural elements and to replace them with Chinese cultural elements. But there's another thing in Tell Me More, that there is actually a lot of Korean in there. There's a lot of Korean text in there. And at the back there's a dictionary, which is English to Korean. So the idea here is that all the keywords in the book are in the back. So it's very much for Koreans, it's very much helping them. But also, this is thanks to Dr. Hyun, who was my co-author here. He was very concerned that the Korean culture is a very strong culture, but students are just not aware of it these days. They're losing it. And so we were thinking that it's a very important thing for students to be able to explain their own culture to foreigners. You know, we've had so much emphasis on talking to foreigners about their own culture, learning about the other culture. But hey, let's talk about Korea. because we've got a lot to tell other people. So there's this whole aspect of being aware of my own culture before I talk to other people, and being proud of what there is in my own culture as well.
Speaking of your own culture, you're a Welshman here in Korea, and you use British spellings in your materials. What's your take on the preference of American English in Korea and in a lot of ESL markets?
Oh, I have no problem with this, but I'm a bit uncompromising in using English, using British spelling, because we have to face the fact that there are loads of different Englishes in the world. That, in fact, the majority of English speakers use the English spelling. So one thing our students have to learn is that there is no standard English. And so I'm very happy to put these things in. While we're at it, I'm also not too bothered about spelling mistakes. I'm really not too bothered about this, because if a student can look at the page and identify a spelling mistake, it means that student is actively interacting with the page. And I'm very happy with that. And if the student then says, "Excuse me, teacher, there's a mistake," yes, that's wonderful, because the subtext is books have mistakes in them. Don't trust this book. Just use it as a learning tool and then throw it away. And another thing that's culturally important here, when I'm saying we don't have to worship the American or the English culture, because people who become Korean businessmen interact with Japanese businessmen and Malaysian businessmen and Chinese businessmen, and they're all speaking Chinglish, Konglish, Japlish, Singlish, and they all understand each other. So I find this is a very important aspect, that lots of these people are going to use English in that sort of situation, not with a native speaker, but with another L2 speaker.
Last question from me. How's your baduk playing these days? Are you still losing to the 8-year-olds?
Wow. Well, my baduk has taken a significant jump these days, because we've just got baduk TV.
I've seen it. 24-hour baduk.
24-hour baduk. Yes, this is heaven. I go home and I watch baduk, and it's fantastic. And you see the best players in the world playing baduk, and you can think, what would I do in that situation?
Do you and your wife fight over the remote, or have you decided to have 2 TVs?
Oh, she's very understanding at the moment. But,
wow.
And I find I can understand that Korean. I'm a specialist in baduk Korean. So it's very funny, because when I started learning Korean, I got a baduk book when I first came to Korea, and I showed it to a teacher, and I said, "Please teach me." And she looked at it and she said, "No, I don't know this." So she said, "No, I can't understand this." So I said, "Thank you and good night." And so I went to here's some more about language learning. I went to the Kiwons, I played baduk, I learned baduk in the situations of immersion learning. So
well, there you have it.
Okay.
Thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us, and best of luck in all your EFL endeavors and your baduk endeavors.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Great to talk to you.